Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we're leaving behind your soft mattress, your charged phone, and your reassuring hum of an air conditioner, and we're throwing you headlong into the mud-slicked heart of medieval England. The year is indistinct, somewhere around the 13th century, but the moment you open your eyes, you know instantly that this is not a place built for your comfort. The air itself seems thicker, pungent with a mix of wood smoke, dung, sweat, and the faint coppery tang of iron tools being worked a few streets away. You blink, still fogged by sleep, and you realise you're not waking in your apartment, but rather in the middle of a village square, a patch of trampled earth surrounded by timber-framed cottages whose crooked beams sag with age. Chickens strut with a kind of arrogant ownership, pecking at crumbs. A pig snorts loudly near your feet. And beyond the low hum of gossiping voices, you catch the church bell clanging from a stone tower in the distance. You probably won't survive this. Not because people are unfriendly, though you'll quickly learn hospitality here comes at a cost, but because everything about this place is designed for endurance, not ease. If you thought running out of Wi-Fi was a crisis, wait until you meet dysentery. Still, you've chosen, or been mysteriously transported to step into this world, and now the task is to navigate it as best as you can. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know exactly where and when in the world you're watching, as we sink together into this muck of history. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice, aside from the overpowering smell, is how busy this village square feels. No one is lounging idly, scrolling through imaginary feeds. Everyone is doing something with a sense of urgency, as though the failure to keep busy might invite hunger or punishment. A woman squats over a basket, gutting fish with a swift knife, her sleeves rolled up, her face set with concentration. Two boys chase each other, their laughter sharp in the air, though they still carry little bundles of firewood strapped across their backs. Men tramp past you, hauling tools, their tunics stiff with dried mud. The marketplace here isn't some charming rustic fair, it is the heartbeat of survival, and if you don't engage, you'll starve. The villagers cast you wary glances. Your clothing looks odd to them, maybe too clean, maybe too finely stitched. Even if you've appeared in some rough-spun outfit to blend in, there's something unmistakably off about you. People here live in each other's pockets, and outsiders are immediately suspect. Strangers in medieval villages often brought risk. Spies, beggars, or worst of all, carriers of disease. A man mutters something about vagabonds spitting in the dust, and you suddenly feel very conspicuous. To ground yourself, you crouch near a trough where a few animals are drinking. The water is cloudy, flecked with straw, and you imagine dipping your hands into it, then think better. This isn't your filtered tap. In fact, one of the quirkiest and most counterintuitive facts about medieval daily life is that water wasn't the safest option. Despite rivers and wells being plentiful, most drinking water was considered risky, because waste ran freely through streets and seeped into sources. Instead, ale, weak, cloudy, brewed in almost every home, was the everyday drink. Even children guzzled it, not to get tipsy, but simply to avoid dropping dead from contaminated water. Historians still argue whether the ale's low alcohol content alone was enough to kill off pathogens. But whatever the truth, it was certainly safer than the greenish swill you're now staring at. You stand, brushing dust from your knees, and your eyes drift to the village church looming beyond the cottages. Its squat stone tower seems ancient, older than anything else in sight, as though it sprouted from the earth itself. That church is not just a place of worship. It is the centre of everything. Law, education, news, gossip, and of course, the promise of salvation or the threat of damnation. Even if you are not inclined toward religion, you cannot survive here without acknowledging the church's hand in daily life. Every villager you pass measures themselves, and likely you, against that crucible of morality. Your stomach growls. The aroma of baking bread drifts from one of the cottages, warm and yeasty, but tinged with something sour. You think bread is safe, right? Except here, it's not always. Grain harvests were unpredictable. and when shortages hit, people resorted to eating bread made from whatever could be gathered: barley, rye, or worse, ergot-infected wheat. Ergot is a fungus that, when baked into bread, could poison entire households, causing convulsions, hallucinations, or death. Some scholars connect these outbreaks with dancing plagues, or even witch panics, when whole groups of people behaved erratically, stumbling through villages as though possessed. And here you are, hungry, eyeing that loaf on a rough wooden shelf. Do you risk it? You take a cautious step toward the bakery, noting how the doorway is so low you'd have to duck to enter. Inside, the floor is uneven, packed earth with scattered rushes that stink faintly of rot. You realise quickly that the villagers' sense of smell has probably dulled to these odours, while your modern nose flinches at every whiff. The baker's wife notices you and immediately frowns, shielding the bread with her arm. Outsiders don't just stroll in and buy things. Money, if you have it, may not even be trusted. Barter is more common here. And to barter, you need goods: wool, eggs, tools, or labour. What can you possibly offer? You retreat, empty-handed, your hunger gnawing at you. Already survival feels daunting. You recall hearing somewhere that the average medieval peasant consumed far fewer calories than a modern adult, yet expended far more energy. Meat was rare, vegetables were seasonal, and famine struck regularly. In fact, mainstream historical records note that the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 killed millions across Europe when rains ruined crops for consecutive years. For villagers like the ones bustling around you, hunger wasn't a distant tragedy. It was a familiar visitor. As you wander farther into the village, you spot a small hut with smoke trickling from its thatched roof. A child leans against the doorframe, her eyes wide as she watches you. Behind her, you glimpse a single dark room, cluttered with tools, baskets, and the glow of a hearth. Families here live crammed together, often sharing space with animals, which provide warmth, but also infestations. Fleas hop freely between species, and as you scratch your wrist absent-mindedly, you begin to suspect you've already acquired a few passengers. A man passes you, leading an ox, its hooves clopping heavily. He nods stiffly, his face weathered like old leather. This is not a man with time for strangers. He gestures toward the fields beyond the village, vast expanses of turned soil, where labourers bend double, swinging hoes or guiding ploughs. That, you realise, is where you'll be expected to go if you want to prove yourself useful. Work is the currency of trust here. Fail to contribute and you'll be branded a burden. Or worse, a thief. Your feet sink into the mud as you step off the packed path. The fields stretch endlessly, dotted with figures hunched in repetitive motions. The soil clings to your shoes, heavier with every step. You try to imagine doing this day after day, sunrise to sunset, with only a brief pause for bread and ale. Your spine twinges at the thought. Modern fitness apps would probably applaud your activity level, but here no one praises toil. It is simply survival. A sudden commotion pulls your gaze back toward the square. A man is being dragged, protesting, toward the stocks, a wooden frame where offenders are locked in and left on display. Children jeer, tossing clods of dirt. His crime? You can't quite catch it, but theft is the likely cause. Punishment in this world is public, humiliating, and often brutal. Justice is less about rehabilitation and more about spectacle, reminding everyone else not to step out of line. You swallow hard, aware that as a newcomer, you're already vulnerable to suspicion. The sun begins to dip, and shadows stretch across the crooked lanes. Villagers retreat into their homes, shuttering windows, bolting doors. Nighttime here is not a time of leisure. It is a time of fear. Without street lamps, the dark is almost absolute, pierced only by the faint glow of hearth fires. To wander alone would mark you as either foolish or threatening. Rumours abound of bandits, spirits, and worse. A woman pulls her child indoors, casting you a nervous glance. You are an unanchored presence in a world that relies on community for safety. You find yourself at the edge of the village, where a small stream trickles, reflecting the twilight. You kneel, cupping water to your lips, hesitating before drinking. The taste is earthy with a hint of iron. It's not refreshing. It's unsettling. You cough, wiping your mouth, wondering if you've just invited sickness into your body. Somewhere behind you, a dog howls, setting off a chain reaction of barking. Exhaustion seeps into your limbs. though the day feels like it has only just begun. You lower yourself onto a patch of grass, staring up at a sky unpolluted by city light. The stars blaze fiercely, constellations sharp and unfamiliar in their brilliance, and yet despite the beauty you feel small, fragile, and profoundly out of place. As you drift towards sleep, your mind spins with the dangers you've glimpsed already. Hunger, disease, suspicion, punishment. Surviving medieval England will not be about clever tricks. It will be about relentless endurance. Tomorrow, the real test begins. The rooster crows far earlier than you would like, jolting you awake from your patch of damp grass, and reminding you that in medieval England no one sleeps in. The villagers are already stirring, their shadows moving against the faint dawn light. You rise stiffly, joints aching from the uneven ground, and realise with an uncomfortable clarity that this is your reality now. There's no snooze button, no coffee machine waiting to rescue you. The only way forward is to throw yourself into the rhythm of peasant life. You shuffle toward the fields, trying to blend into the flow of bodies trudging that way. The men carry wooden-handled hoes, heavy and awkward, their iron blades dulled by years of use. The women tote baskets and children in equal measure, multitasking in ways that make you feel clumsy by comparison. A few teenagers swing along with youthful energy, though even they carry the weary slouch of people who've never known leisure. The fields are a patchwork of soil divided into long strips, stretching as far as your eyes can see. This is the open field system, communal land broken into narrow strips farmed by individual families. The concept is simple. The lord of the manor owns everything, but you and the other peasants get a small portion to grow enough to survive. Of course you owe him rent, labour and loyalty, which means much of what you produce never touches your lips. Historians still argue whether this system was efficient or wasteful, but for the peasants bent double in front of you, it is not a theory. It is life. Someone presses a hoe into your hands. The wood is rough, the weight uneven, and when you copy the others by driving it into the soil, shock waves travel up your arms. You grit your teeth and try again. Within minutes your back protests, your palms blister, and sweat drips down your temples. Meanwhile, the villagers work with a grim steadiness born of repetition. You glance around, expecting sympathy, but they barely notice you. To them, exhaustion isn't noteworthy. It's the air they breathe. By mid-morning the sun climbs, and your stomach growls loud enough to draw amused glances. A woman unwraps a bundle and passes you a hunk of coarse bread. It is dense, almost brick-like, flecked with bits of bran. You bite, the crust scraping your gums, and chew slowly. This bread is made from maslin, a mix of wheat and rye, which is hardier than pure wheat and more resistant to bad weather. But it is also heavier, less tasty, and sometimes mixed with whatever filler can stretch the dough, peas, beans, or acorns if harvests are poor. You choke it down, washing with a swig of weak ale passed from a shared jug. The ale is warm, flat, faintly sour, yet oddly refreshing compared to the murky water from last night. Work resumes almost instantly. The fields demand endless attention. Ploughing, sowing, weeding, harvesting. Nothing is mechanized. Each task is done by hand, each acre carved out of the soil by sweat. You bend again, shoulders screaming. In this moment you understand why life expectancy here hovers around the 30s. It's not that people simply drop dead at 35, it's that disease and famine pick them off early, and even those who survive are worn down by labour that never relents. A shout breaks the monotony. One of the oxen has stumbled, its harness twisted. The men hurry over, adjusting the yoke. You realise how dependent everyone is on these animals. They are not pets, but engines of survival. Without oxen, ploughing the heavy clay soil would be nearly impossible. The villagers murmur anxiously, for a lame ox could spell hunger in winter. That's another quirky truth about this world. Animals were insured, not in the way you think, with paperwork and monthly premiums, but by village custom or collective responsibility. Lose an ox, and the community might step in to help, because one family's misfortune could ripple into collective disaster. The sun arcs higher, and you pause to wipe your brow. Your hands sting, raw from the hose handle. You glance at the others again. Their skin is leathery, their muscles corded, their movements efficient. Children, no older than 8, work alongside parents, scattering seeds, shooing away birds, Childhood is not a protected stage here. It is an apprenticeship in survival. One boy smirks at your clumsy rhythm, and you feel the sting of humiliation. Welcome to your performance review, medieval style. By noon, a pause is finally granted. Everyone squats in the shade of hedgerows, pulling out more bread, bits of cheese hardened from age, onions, or if they're lucky, a scrap of salted pork. A woman offers you a slice of turnip, its bitter crunch surprising your tongue. Conversation is sparse. Mouths are too busy chewing and fatigue presses heavy. But you catch fragments. Gossip about who owes rent, whispers about strange lights near the woods, a complaint about the reeve, the man who enforces the Lord's demands. You store the details carefully. Here, knowledge is survival. Once, a travelling friar preached that toil was holy, that sweating in the fields was a form of prayer. And though many peasants nodded, you sense a different truth here. Work is not holy, it is compulsory. You toil because to stop is to starve. Still, religion threads through even this. Someone murmurs a grace before eating. Someone else makes the sign of the cross when a crow caws ominously overhead. You lean back against the hedgerow, eyelids drooping, but rest is brief. A man nudges you with a muddy boot, and the group rises again. Afternoon stretches long and merciless. The tasks shift. Weeding, repairing fences, collecting dung for fertilizer. You're handed a wicker basket and instructed through gestures to scatter manure across a patch of soil. The stench is overwhelming. You gag, earning laughter from a cluster of teenagers. One boy calls you soft or something like it. You don't need translation. And yet, as disgusting as the task feels, you realize it is vital. Fertilizing fields with manure replenishes nutrients, ensuring next season's growth. Without it, soil quickly exhausts itself. Medieval farming had no synthetic safety nets. Crop rotation and manure were the only defences against barren land. Historians still debate whether yields were truly as poor as often claimed. Some argue medieval peasants managed their land more wisely than given credit. But whether wise or not, the work is relentless. The hours drag. You feel your muscles trembling with fatigue, your lips cracked, your shirt plastered with sweat. Every part of you screams for rest, but rest never comes soon enough. You glance again at the villagers. No one seems fresh. No one seems energetic. They are all equally dulled by repetition, and yet they keep going. That, you realise, is the secret. Not strength, but endurance. Toward evening, the tools are gathered, and the group lumbers back toward the village. Smoke curls from chimneys, the promise of stew luring tired bodies home. You trudge with them, barely lifting your feet, aching from head to toe. At the square, you drop the hoe onto a pile and slump against a wall. Your hands are blistered, palms angry red. You doubt you could pick up that hoe again tomorrow, and yet tomorrow demands it. As darkness falls, families retreat into huts, shutting you out once again. You find yourself hovering, uncertain where to go. A man finally gestures you toward a barn, where straw is piled in a corner. You collapse gratefully, the smell of animals oddly comforting after the day's chaos. Above, the rafters creak with the weight of pigeons, their cooing soft in the gloom. You curl into the straw, body aching, and close your eyes. Lying there, you realise the truth. Peasant life is not glamorous, not noble, not picturesque. It is a cycle of dawn to dusk labour, brief pauses for coarse food, and an endless fight to wring life from the soil. Your modern softness, your reliance on comforts, would betray you here in an instant. Still, you survived today. Tomorrow will test you again, and the next day, and the next. For now, you let exhaustion carry you away, the barn settling into silence, the village into uneasy sleep. The stars glitter outside, indifferent to your struggle. You wonder if you will ever adapt, or if medieval England will grind you down before you have the chance. You wake again with straw clinging to your hair and a dull ache in every muscle. The barn is colder than you expected, the animals restless, their low grunts and shifting hooves reminding you that warmth here is never free. A farmer clatters past the doorway, leading a cow out toward a pasture, and the sky outside glows pale with the morning. Your body craves coffee, but there is none. Your mind imagines a greasy breakfast plate, but all you smell is smoke and onions, and you realise with a pit in your stomach, food is not guaranteed here. As you shuffle into the square, the morning hum is already underway. A woman stands by a pot suspended over a fire, stirring something that smells faintly of porridge. The villagers glance at you, curious but not welcoming, and you feel again the outsider's discomfort. Still, hunger overrides caution. You inch closer, hoping for a taste. The woman hands her children wooden bowls of pottage, a thick stew of barley, beans, cabbage and leeks. It is grey, gloopy, not Instagram-worthy in the slightest. When she notices your gaze, she frowns, but one of the children giggles and offers you a spoonful. The taste is earthy, bland, yet surprisingly filling. This pottage, you soon learn, is the staple meal of peasants across England. It can be stretched for days, simmered endlessly, and altered with whatever scraps are at hand. If someone managed to scrounge bacon fat, it might have flavour. If not, it was still fuel. Bread remains central too, though not the fluffy white loaf you dream of. What you see here are coarse, dark hunks cut from maslin loaves. You take a bite. The taste is sour, gritty, and the crust grinds against your teeth. It fills you but does not delight you. And you suddenly realise why bread riots and grain shortages sparked so much unrest in the medieval world. Hunger gnaws faster than politics. Nearby, you notice a man drinking from a leather flask. Expecting water, you ask for a sip, and he chuckles before handing it over. The liquid is warm, cloudy, and faintly fizzy. It is ale, weak by design but safer than water. Everyone here drinks it. Men, women, even toddlers. Water is suspicious, likely tainted by waste, but ale, brewed quickly with a low alcohol content, is considered cleansing. You swallow, surprised at how it cuts the thirst, and then hand it back, wiping your mouth. You wonder what your doctor would say about toddlers chugging ale before breakfast, but in this world it is considered sensible parenting. Historians still argue whether medieval diets were disastrously unhealthy or surprisingly balanced for the era. On one hand, peasants ate far less meat and sugar than modern people, and their diets were heavy with fibre from grains and vegetables. On the other hand, malnutrition was rampant, vitamins poorly understood, and famine always one bad harvest away. And famine was no rare spectre. You recall reading of the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317, when torrential rains ruined crops for years. Starvation, disease and desperation led to reports of parents abandoning children, or worse. Your stomach clenches at the thought, but it's not an abstract one. As you wander the square, you see thin children nibbling crusts, women scraping pots to capture every last drop, men eyeing the stores of grain jealously. There is no abundance here. Every bite matters. Waste is unthinkable. Even bones are boiled into broth until they disintegrate. You spot a dog gnawing furiously at a shard of bone, and you envy even that. Still, food is not only survival, it is social glue. You are beckoned to follow a family into their hut for the evening meal. Inside, the air is smoky from the central hearth, the only source of light. The family gathers around a rough table, setting out bowls of pottage and bread. There is little meat, except for a sliver of salted pork added to flavour the pot. The father explains, with gestures and fragments of English you piece together, that pigs are often slaughtered in late autumn, and their meat preserved through salting or smoking to last the winter. Today's bit is a luxury, a celebration perhaps because a stranger has joined them. You raise the bowl, sipping slowly. The stew is thin but warming. The salty bite of pork surprises you, and you close your eyes, savouring. Everyone eats quickly, no second helpings, no lingering. When the pot is empty, the family leans back with sighs that sound more of relief than satisfaction. You wipe your bowl with a crust, mimicking them, and realise that the ritual of scraping clean is not manners but necessity. Nothing can be wasted. A curious tidbit emerges as you eat. Not all bread is equal. The white, fine-milled wheat bread is reserved for the lord and the wealthy. Peasants rarely see it. Instead, they eat darker loaves of rye, barley or maslin. Sometimes, when harvests fail, they stretch the dough with ground beans, peas or chestnuts. You shudder at the thought of chestnut bread, imagining its strange taste, but here it is a blessing. In fact, famine bread becomes a phrase whispered with dread, reminding everyone how precarious life is. Your host passes you another swig of ale. This one tastes stronger, sharper, with a tang that suggests it has been fermenting longer. You cough, earning a chuckle. Drinking ale is not about pleasure, it is about safety. Yet you sense that after a long day's labour, a little buzz is welcome too. In towns, alehouses become centres of gossip, business and relaxation. But here in the countryside it is homemade, drunk in modest amounts, and woven into daily life as casually as water is for you. Later, as the family prepares to sleep, you sit by the hearth, stomach heavy but not full. Hunger here is not always a matter of empty bellies. It is the constant awareness that food is finite, precarious, one bad harvest away from disappearing. You recall that even in times of plenty, diets lacked variety. Meat was rare, fish scarce unless you lived near rivers, and fruit seasonal. Apples, pears and berries appeared in brief windows and vanished quickly. Dried or preserved fruit was expensive, out of reach for peasants. The quirky reality. Sometimes people turn to things you'd never consider edible. Grains sprouting mould, herbs with dubious effects, even bark ground into powder. One old woman mutters about nettles making good soup in hard times. You smile politely, but you make a mental note. Desperation rewrites the menu. By candle's glow, you hear murmurs of gratitude for what was eaten. A child whispers a prayer, thanking God for bread. You shift, uncomfortable, but also oddly humbled. You've never prayed over a loaf of supermarket bread, never worried it might vanish tomorrow. You lie awake, the taste of ale still on your tongue, the smoky stew heavy in your stomach. The family snores softly around you, children curled together like puppies. Outside the night deepens, and you hear the distant howls of dogs. Hunger is always at the edges of this world, pressing in like the dark. And you, soft and unprepared, feel it too. One last thought lingers as sleep overtakes you. In medieval England, food is never just food. It is survival, hierarchy, ritual, and fear, all simmered together in a pot that never quite fills. And if you want to endure here, you'll have to learn to live on less, much less than you ever imagined. The dawn comes creeping in again, pale light slipping through the gaps in thatch, carrying with it the sounds of animals stirring and villagers clattering about. You blink awake in the smoky interior of a hut, realizing with a start that you've spent the night curled against the hearth alongside a family who, out of cautious kindness, let you share their space. It is not comfort in the way you know it. The air is thick with the scent of damp straw, wood smoke and unwashed bodies, and as you sit up you knock your head against the low roof beam, proving instantly that medieval architecture was not designed for anyone taller than 5.5 feet. The hut itself is simple, almost shockingly so. Timber posts, wattle and daub walls, and a roof of thatch held down with wooden pegs and ropes. The floor is packed earth, uneven and littered with rushes that were sprinkled across it weeks ago. They are supposed to absorb filth and smells, but instead they rot quietly underfoot, crunching damply when you move. Historians still argue whether rushes were replaced weekly, monthly, or whenever the smell became unbearable. Judging by your nostrils right now, the last option feels depressingly accurate. In the corner, a pig grunts softly, penned in by a crude wooden barrier. Chickens strut about freely, pecking at crumbs near the hearth. At first you think it odd to share living quarters with livestock, but then the logic dawns. Animals provide heat in winter, protection from theft, and when necessary, food. Of course, this arrangement also means fleas, lice and vermin run rampant. You scratch absent-mindedly at your arm and grimace, imagining the passengers you've probably acquired already. The family moves with routine efficiency. The mother stirs a pot of yesterday's pottage, thinning it with water for breakfast. The father pulls on a patched tunic, then steps outside to check on the oxen. The children scuffle, dragging their feet until one is shoved into gathering firewood. No one complains loudly. It is simply what must be done. The hut may be small, smoky and crowded, but it houses an entire world of labour, survival and kinship. You glance at the sleeping arrangements and feel a wave of claustrophobia. Against the far wall, a single bed frame, little more than a wooden rectangle with rope supports, holds a straw mattress. The parents share this space. The children sleep on piles of straw in the corners, wrapped in rough wool blankets. Privacy does not exist here. Conversations, arguments, intimacy, all unfold within earshot of everyone else. If you value solitude, abandon the idea. Medieval life is communal, whether you like it or not. The smoky air burns your eyes. That hearth, central to the hut, is both salvation and hazard. It provides heat, light and cooking space, yet it has no chimney. The smoke seeps upward through a small hole in the thatch, but much of it hangs low, coating lungs and walls alike. Coughing is common, especially among children. You imagine how many lives are shortened by breathing this daily, and yet, without fire, survival through an English winter would be impossible. A quirky detail strikes you. Walls are often plastered not just with clay, but with a mixture of mud, straw and dung. It's cheap, insulating and durable. When you lean back against the wall, you feel the faint give of this mixture, rough to the touch. You suppress a laugh at the thought of medieval interior design being advertised today, now featuring authentic cow dung plaster for that rustic charm. But the reality here is practical, not pretty. As you step outside, blinking against the brightness, you see that the village is a patchwork of such homes clustered close together around the church. Larger houses, built of timber frames and sometimes even stone, belong to wealthier peasants or officials like the Reeve. But most resemble the hut you just left, functional, flimsy by modern standards, and constantly vulnerable to weather, fire or collapse. Thatched roofs, though picturesque in storybooks, are tinder waiting for a stray spark. Entire villages have been known to burn in a single night. Your hosts greet you with nods, ushering you to walk with them toward the fields. Along the way, the father explains, in fragments of English you piece together, that this home has been in his family for generations. In truth, peasants rarely owned their homes in the way you think. They held them in exchange for service and rent owed to the lord. Land, house, and all could be reassigned, inherited, or taken away depending on circumstance. The security of home ownership that modern people cling to simply doesn't exist here. The children skip ahead, one carrying a small clay jug of ale. You realise again how woven into life that drink is. They'll sip it at breakfast, again at midday, and once more at night, all without question. For them, it's less about indulgence than survival. As you return later in the day, sweat-soaked from labour in the fields, you slump against the doorframe of the hut, grateful for its shade. The mother welcomes you back in, ladling more pottage into bowls. The children crowd around the hearth, slurping noisily, while the father stretches his legs on the bed frame. For a moment, the cramped, smoky space feels less alien and more like a living heart, pulsing with warmth and survival. It dawns on you that medieval family life is built on interdependence. Each member contributes, from the smallest child gathering kindling to the father pushing a plough. Grandparents, if they survive that long, share wisdom and help with children. Widows remarry quickly, for survival alone is nearly impossible. Households are not just nuclear families. They often absorb servants, apprentices, or boarders. Privacy is alien, but solidarity is everything. Historians still argue whether peasants lived lives of misery or quiet resilience. Some records paint them as downtrodden, exploited, barely scraping by. Others suggest that, though life was hard, communities were tight-knit, families strong, and laughter still found its way into smoky huts. Tonight, as you listen to the children giggle over some private joke, you sense truth in the latter. Hardship is constant, yes, but so too is the comfort of belonging. As night deepens, you prepare to sleep once more inside the hut. You curl onto the straw pile, itchy and uneven, and pull a blanket over your shoulders. The hearth glows faintly, casting flickering shadows across the low ceiling. The pig snuffles in its corner, the chickens settle onto their roosts, and the family drifts into slumber around you. The air is thick, stifling, the smoke catching in your throat. You cough softly, turning over, and realise you're breathing the same air this family has breathed for years, decades, generations. This hut may not be much by modern standards. It is cramped, smoky, unsanitary, but it is home. It shelters, feeds, and binds its people together. And as uncomfortable as you are, you understand. In medieval England, family and home are the only shields against the endless tide of hunger, toil, and fear. You close your eyes, and for the first time, you feel not just like an observer, but a participant in this shared life. Perhaps tomorrow, you'll even laugh with the children. Perhaps tomorrow, you'll forget the itch of straw and the sting of smoke. Perhaps tomorrow, this strange little hut will begin to feel, if not comfortable, at least like a place where survival is possible. The morning begins with coughing, raspy, hacking, endless coughing that rattles the walls of the hut. You blink awake and realise it is not just one person. The father hacks into a rag, a child wheezes in the corner. Even the mother clears her throat again and again as though dislodging smoke from her lungs. You sit up, rubbing your eyes, and the heavy air reminds you, this house is a breeding ground for sickness. You might have thought yesterday's aches came from farm work, but no. It is illness that stalks this land, closer than hunger, deadlier than toil. You step outside, hoping for fresh air, only to be greeted by the sharp stench of waste. A boy trundles past dragging a bucket, its contents sloshing ominously. He tips it onto a dung heap just beyond the huts, and flies immediately swarm. This is sanitation in medieval England. Waste piles, open drains, cesspits dug near homes. No flush toilets, no soap dispensers waiting patiently by the sink. You cover your nose, but the smell is inescapable. This is the ground in which disease flourishes. Villagers shuffle toward the fields, some already pale and sweating. One child drags behind, her face flushed. No one pauses to fuss. Sickness is so common, it scarcely draws notice. You realise grimly that survival here is not just about enduring hunger or labour, but about dodging an endless carousel of ailments. Dysentery from tainted water, fevers from unknown causes, infections from simple cuts. A woman beckons you toward a hut where a baby wails. Inside, the scene is heartbreaking. The child burns with fever, tiny chest heaving. The mother dips a rag in cool water and presses it to the baby's forehead, her face lined with helplessness. She mutters a prayer, rocking back and forth. Medicine, as you know it, does not exist here. There are no antibiotics, no sterile instruments, no neat bottles of syrup. Instead, there are herbs, charms, and hope. The local cunning woman arrives, a hunched figure with a basket of dried plants and a pouch of powders. She mutters words you don't understand, sprinkles herbs into the baby's drink, and smears a paste across its brow. The smell is pungent, earthy, almost bitter. You watch, torn between admiration and doubt. Some herbs are genuinely useful. Willow bark for pain, garlic as an antibacterial, honey for wounds. Others are little more than superstition, and historians still argue whether such folk healers were quacks exploiting fear or invaluable preservers of practical knowledge. What's clear to you is that here they are the only option. A quirky fact floats into your mind. Urine was sometimes used to treat wounds. Its ammonia supposedly cleaned cuts, though the smell alone might have scared infection away. Another cure involved applying a live chicken to a swollen wound. Believing its warmth drew out poison. You shudder, realizing that if you fell ill here, you might become the unwilling subject of such remedies. The village priest enters later, swinging a censer of incense. He mutters Latin prayers over the child, sprinkling holy water. Faith is medicine too, in the eyes of many. After all, disease is often explained as God's punishment, or the devil's work, or bad air sent to test the faithful. In times of plague, whole communities march barefoot in processions, whipping themselves to atone for imagined sins. It is ritual as much as remedy. The coughing spreads around you. You glance nervously at your own hands, wondering what invisible parasites or bacteria now cling there. Soap exists, true, but it is crude, animal fat mixed with ashes, and rarely used for daily hand washing. Most villagers clean themselves with water alone, if at all. Lice are constant companions. Fleas, you recall, are not just annoyances, they carry the seeds of disaster. For though it lies centuries ahead in your timeline, you know what the people here cannot. The Black Death waits like a shadow, poised to sweep through in 1347. It will kill a third, perhaps half, of Europe. In these very huts, families will vanish overnight, carts will groan with corpses, fields will go unploughed, and though the villagers will blame the stars, the Jews, the wrath of God, historians still argue about the plague's precise origins. The real culprits are the fleas and rats already scurrying underfoot. You glance at the pig in the corner, the dog scratching its side, and you feel a chill. You are breathing in the prelude to catastrophe. The day drags on with more glimpses of misery. A man limps into the square, his foot swollen from a cut that has festered. The local barber surgeon is summoned. You watch in horrified fascination as the man sets up his tools, knives, a saw, a cautery iron heated in the fire. There is no anaesthesia here. The surgeon holds the man's leg, scrapes at the wound, and pours boiling wine onto it. The man screams, clutching at the bench, sweat pouring down his face. The smell of charred flesh curls your stomach. Yet oddly, this is one of the better treatments. Cauterization sometimes saves lives. The barber surgeon may also pull teeth, set bones, or even attempt bloodletting. That last practice is everywhere. People believe illness stems from imbalanced humours. Blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile. To bleed a patient is to restore harmony. Whether it helps or weakens fatally, well, historians still argue. Later, you witness a burial. A child has died overnight, fever claiming her before the dawn. The villagers dig a shallow grave near the churchyard, laying her body in wrapped cloth. There is little ceremony, only brief prayers. Death is so frequent it cannot be lingered over. You stand in silence, feeling the weight of grief settle like a stone in your chest. For the family, the loss is heartbreaking but not unusual. They have more children, and likely they will lose more. Childhood is the most dangerous phase of life here, survival far from guaranteed. In the evening you return to the hut, the air thick again with smoke. The family gathers close, whispering fears of illness spreading. The mother hangs a sprig of herbs above the door, sage perhaps, or rosemary, believing it wards off disease. You glance at it, wishing it were so simple, and yet you sense the comfort it gives them. Even a placebo can soothe when true medicine is absent. As you lie on the straw, the itch of fleas at your ankles, you cough softly into your sleeve. Is it just the smoke, or something more? You wonder how long your modern immune system could withstand this world, unshielded by vaccines or antibiotics. Probably not long. The truth presses down on you like the smoky air. In medieval England, survival is a coin toss, and disease is the hand forever flipping it. Still you drift into uneasy sleep, whispering a silent prayer. Whether to science, fate, or God, you're not sure. You only know that tomorrow you'll need strength again, for misery here never takes a day off. The cock crows again, sharp and insistent, but today your bones ache in a different way. Not just from field work, not just from smoke and straw, but from a creeping awareness that the sweat you've spilled may not even benefit you. The family you've been shadowing seems anxious this morning, their eyes darting toward the church tower where a bell tolls slowly, almost ominously. It's not Sunday, not a feast day, but still the villagers gather in the square. You shuffle out with them, adjusting your tunic, wondering what summons has drawn everyone from hearth and field. At the centre of the square stands the reeve, the Lord's appointed overseer clutching a scroll. His tunic is cleaner than most, his shoes sturdier, and his posture carries authority. The villagers hush. He reads aloud the list of dues owed this week. Bushels of barley, hens for the Lord's kitchen, days of unpaid labour on the domain, the Lord's own lands. You watch faces tighten, shoulders sag. This is feudalism made visible. Your work is never truly yours. Whatever you grow, whatever you reap, the Lord takes his share first. A murmur rises when the reeve mentions an extra boon work day. The harvest has been poor, and the Lord demands an additional day of free service. The peasants groan softly, but none dare refuse. Their bodies are the currency of the manor, their time conscripted. You realise suddenly that you have no weekend to look forward to, no overtime pay. Instead, you belong to the land as much as the oxen do. The reeve continues, reciting rents. So many pence for a cottage plot, so many sheaves of hay, so many eggs per household. Money, when it appears, is rare. Most rents are paid in kind, and failure to deliver can mean seizure of land, fines, or worse. A man near you shifts uneasily, clearly short on his dues. The reeve's eyes linger on him, a warning without words. You glance around, half expecting someone to protest, to rebel. But the villagers simply bow their heads. They are bound not just by fear, but by tradition. Feudal obligations are as old as memory. To resist is to risk not only punishment, but exile, and without the protection of the Lord's manor, survival is nearly impossible. Bandits roam the forests. Hunger gnaws quickly. To belong here, you must submit. After the reading, the villagers disperse grimly. You trail behind the father of your host family as he trudges toward the domain fields. These are larger, better tended, reserved for the Lord's crops. Here, peasants labour not for themselves, but for him, their sweat flowing into his granaries. The irony bites deep. The very fields that feed his household starve yours. You bend to the hoe again, the soil unyielding, the sun relentless. At midday, the reeve rides past on a horse inspecting progress. His gaze is sharp, searching for slackers. A boy pauses to rest his back and the reeve snaps at him, threatening a fine. You tighten your grip on the hoe, feigning vigour. The thought of punishment for idleness terrifies you, but so does the exhaustion creeping into your muscles. Later you watch as the miller collects grain. Every peasant must grind their wheat at the Lord's mill, paying a portion as fee. Even here, nothing is free. You hear mutters about millers being cheats, adding weight to their tolls. Whether true or not, resentment simmers quietly. And yet no one dares confront the system. The mill belongs to the Lord. The miller is his man. A quirky detail surfaces in your mind. Some lords demanded hens as rent because poultry was a steady supply of meat and eggs. Others demanded honey, wax, or even labour like repairing roads or carrying messages. Feudal dues could be bizarrely specific. One record even notes peasants owing eels from a nearby river. You chuckle under your breath, imagining the reeve demanding a writhing basket of eels from this village. But here, it's no joke. The Lord owns your labour in whatever form he desires. The family you've been living with speaks in hushed tones that evening. They worry about tithes, the tenth of everything owed to the church as well. Between the Lord and the priest, their harvest dwindles rapidly. You realise how little remains for their own table. No wonder their meals are thin. No wonder hunger is constant. Historians still argue whether peasants accepted feudalism willingly, seeing it as mutual protection, or whether they resented it bitterly but lacked means to resist. The truth likely lies in between. The Lord does provide. His manor courts settle disputes. His men defend against raiders. His wealth sponsors the church. Yet the cost is crushing. The peasants' backs bear the weight of his power, and their bellies feel the lack. As the evening settles, you see villagers trudging back from boon work, faces streaked with dirt. Children run to greet them, clinging to their legs, but the parents' smiles are tired, thin. They have worked for the Lord all day and now must return to their own strips of land, hoping to scrape enough from soil already weary. You join them, hands blistered, feet sore. The labour never ends. Inside the hut, the family eats quietly. The father counts their remaining grain, muttering about how little will be left after rent and tithe. The mother shoos the children to bed, then whispers about the reeve's sharp eyes and harsher tongue. You lie on the straw, listening, realising that survival here is not just about enduring hunger and disease, but about navigating obligations that leave no space for rest. Before sleep, you think back to your modern life. Complaints about taxes, grumbles about bills. Those felt heavy enough. But here, the burden is relentless and personal. You do not pay through invisible bank transfers. You pay with your body, your sweat, your hens, your grain. You pay face to face to men who watch you with suspicion. And tomorrow, you will rise again to do the same. Because in medieval England, the Lord's demands are as inevitable as the sunrise, and just as merciless. The bell tolls, deep and resonant, rolling across the thatched roofs like thunder from a distant storm. You wake with a start, the family around you already stirring, tugging on rough woolen garments and shuffling toward the door. Today is not a market day, not a boon work day. Today is Sunday, and in medieval England that means one thing above all else: church. You join the slow-moving stream of villagers filing toward the squat stone tower at the heart of the settlement. The church looms larger as you approach, its rough-hewn walls flecked with moss, its doorway carved with worn symbols. The smell of incense drifts faintly on the air, mingling with the smoke from nearby hearths. Everyone walks in silence, faces solemn, children tugged along by the hands of parents who know better than to be late. Stepping inside, you're struck immediately by the gloom. Narrow windows admit only thin shafts of light, tinted faintly by scraps of coloured glass. The air is heavy, thick with incense and the murmur of Latin phrases that you barely recognise. The priest, dressed in embroidered vestments far finer than any peasant's tunic, moves with deliberate solemnity. His voice rises and falls, words incomprehensible, yet undeniably powerful. You realise that for most villagers, these sounds are as mysterious as thunder or wind. Few here can read or understand Latin. Faith is not built on comprehension, but on trust and fear. You shuffle onto a wooden bench, feeling the rough grain beneath your fingers. The family sits beside you, bowing their heads, crossing themselves at the right moments. You imitate them clumsily, hoping not to draw suspicion. For here, belief is not optional. The church governs birth, marriage, death, and nearly every moment in between. To stray is to risk not only social disgrace but eternal damnation. The priest's sermon, translated occasionally into the vernacular, centres on sin and salvation. He warns of hellfire, describing vividly the torments awaiting liars, thieves, adulterers, and heretics. His words paint lurid images: fire unquenchable, demons with claws, the gnashing of teeth. You feel a chill despite the warm crush of bodies around you. The villagers lean forward, faces pale. For them, hell is not metaphor. It is a looming certainty unless they obey, confess, tithe, and believe, and confess they must. After the sermon, villagers line up to murmur sins into the priest's ear. You watch nervously, wondering what you might confess if pressed. That you doubt the system, that you long for hot showers and antibiotics, that you are an imposter in their world. Better to stay silent. The priest's eyes sweep the congregation with unnerving sharpness. He knows who has confessed and who has not. And suspicion in a village this small is dangerous. Outside afterward, the square comes alive again, but the mood is subdued. Men speak quietly of tithes, 10% of everything owed to the church. Women compare notes on feast days and saints' relics rumoured to cure illness. Children chase each other, only to be shushed by parents who remind them that the Sabbath is a day of reverence. You feel the grip of the church tightening around you. Not only does it command belief, it dictates rhythm. Days of rest, days of fasting, days of feasting. Even your calendar belongs to it. Later you wander toward the churchyard. Rows of graves line the space, marked by simple wooden crosses. Some are fresh, earth still loose. Death is everywhere here, and the church offers the only comfort: the promise of heaven if you obey, the threat of hell if you do not. A woman kneels by a grave, whispering prayers for her lost child. You pause, throat tight. In this world, grief is constant, and faith is the only salve. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind. Some villagers believed saints' relics could cure illness or protect from misfortune. Pilgrims travelled miles to touch a fragment of bone, a scrap of cloth, even a vial of supposedly holy blood. The trade in relics was immense, and some were undoubtedly fake. Yet to the faithful, they were priceless. Imagine the desperation of clinging to a bone fragment, hoping it shields you from plague. You glance at the villagers filing past the church and realise that, for them, such belief is not foolish, but necessary. Historians still argue whether medieval faith was heartfelt devotion or enforced obedience. Some say peasants genuinely embraced belief, finding hope in ritual. Others argue fear of punishment kept them in line. Watching the bowed heads, the whispered prayers, you sense both. There is comfort in belonging, in ritual, in community. And there is terror in the alternative. As dusk falls, the family you stay with gathers again in the hut. Before eating, they murmur a prayer of thanks, crossing themselves. Afterward, the father tells a story of a sinner who ignored confession and was dragged into hell by demons. The children gasp, clutching at their blankets. Their eyes dart toward the hearth shadows as though monsters might crawl forth. You feel your own skin prickle. This is bedtime in medieval England. Not lullabies, but cautionary tales. Later, as you lie on the straw, the echoes of the priest's sermon swirl in your mind. Fire, torment, eternal punishment. You close your eyes, whispering a half-sincere prayer. Not because you believe, but because fear seeps deeper than logic in the dark. You wonder if, centuries from now, historians will argue about your own world's beliefs with the same detached curiosity. For now, though, faith is not an academic question. It is survival. And in medieval England, survival and salvation are never far apart. You wake to the sound of fabric rustling, and for a moment you're disoriented. It's still dim in the hut, but you see the mother of the family tying her woolen kirtle with a length of cord, then slipping her feet into rough leather shoes. The children squirm into patched tunics, tugging at sleeves that don't quite reach their wrists. The father pulls on hose that sag around his legs, then binds them with strips of cloth. It dawns on you that, in this world, comfort in clothing is not a priority. Warmth and durability matter more than style. You glance down at yourself, still in the same tunic you were given when you arrived. It's itchy, scratchy, made from coarse wool that rubs against your skin with every movement. At first, you thought you might adjust, but the truth is clear. Wool is unrelenting. It holds warmth, yes, but it also clings to sweat, stiffens with dirt, and seems to invite every flea in the county to make a home. You scratch at your arm and sigh. Welcome to medieval comfort, or rather, the absence of it. Clothing here is more than just protection. It is a badge of status. The wealthy wear brighter dyes, scarlets from madder, deep blues from woad, even expensive imported fabrics like silk. But peasants like those around you stick to browns, greys and muddy greens, the colours of the fields they work in. Dyes are costly, fabrics rarer still. A single cloak might serve a family for generations, patched until only the original threadbare core remains. You realise quickly that your outfit brands you as poor no matter how you wear it. The children tug at your sleeve, giggling at your awkwardness. You help the youngest tie his belt, a length of rope fraying at the ends. Belts are important here, not just for holding garments, but for carrying tools. Knives, pouches, even small religious tokens. Without one, you feel oddly incomplete, as though you're missing your wallet, your keys, and your phone all at once. Laundry is another ordeal entirely. You watch as women trudge to the stream with armfuls of clothes, scrubbing them against rocks, beating them with paddles. Soap exists, but it's harsh, made from animal fat and ashes, leaving garments stiff and reeking faintly of smoke. Drying happens on bushes or lines strung between posts, and of course there's no privacy. Your undergarments, simple linen braise for men, shifts for women, flap in the breeze for everyone to see. You feel exposed, but the villagers don't bat an eye. Modesty is a luxury here. One quirky tidbit strikes you. Medieval people often wore the same undergarments for weeks, if not months at a time. Linen shifts, worn under wool, absorbed sweat and grime, but washing them frequently was impractical. Instead, they layered clothing, aired them out, and relied on the smoke from hearths to mask odours. You glance at your own tunic and wince. The idea of fresh laundry every day feels like a distant dream. As the day unfolds, you notice how clothing shapes labour. Men's tunics are shorter, allowing easier movement in the fields. Women's dresses are longer, hems dragging in mud, though often tucked up with girdles while working. Children wear miniature versions of adult clothes. There are no bright sneakers, no cartoon t-shirts, just tiny woolen tunics. Everyone looks older than their years, their garments aging them further. The family you stay with owns only a handful of outfits. Clothes are expensive, hand-stitched, often handed down. The mother patches endlessly, needle flashing in firelight, turning scraps into sleeves, sleeves into rags. Nothing is wasted. You realise quickly that fashion is not seasonal here. It is permanent. You wear what you have until it disintegrates, and then you salvage what remains. Historians still argue how often peasants truly change their clothes. Some records suggest only a couple of outfits per person, worn until threadbare. Others hint that wealthier peasants might own linen shifts enough to rotate. Either way, wardrobe choices are not a concept. The thought of choosing between 20 shirts in the morning would draw blank stares here. In the evening, a neighbour stops by, showing off a new cloak dyed a deep blue. The family admires it with genuine awe. Blue dye from woad takes labour and cost, and owning such a cloak suggests relative prosperity. You touch the fabric lightly. It is smoother than your own tunic, softer against the skin. For a fleeting moment you envy him deeply. Then you remember the itch along your ribs and wonder if even his cloak is crawling with lice. The quirky detail of headwear emerges too. Hats are everywhere. Men wear coifs, caps or hoods attached to cloaks. Women cover their hair with veils, wimples or kerchiefs, modesty entwined with religion. Hair left uncovered marks you as wild, immoral or poor. Even children wear caps, protecting them from sun and cold. You try tying a cloth around your head, clumsy with the knots, earning laughter from the children. But when the evening chill sets in, you're grateful. A simple scrap of linen can mean the difference between comfort and misery. As you settle onto the straw at night, scratching at your tunic again, you reflect on how clothing is both shield and shackle. It marks who you are, it keeps you alive, but it also weighs on you, stifles you, and never truly feels clean. In your world, clothing is self-expression, comfort, even indulgence. Here, it is survival stitched together with thread, patches, and resignation. You close your eyes, tugging the rough blanket tighter. Comfort, you realise, is a concept that belongs to another time. In medieval England, clothing is never about ease. It is about enduring the itch, the weight, the endless repairs, and wearing your place in the world on your very skin. The morning begins not with hoeing or hauling, but with a ripple of excitement. Word spreads quickly through the village. Today there is a market in the nearby town. The family you've been shadowing is already bustling, gathering their small stock of goods. The mother has wrapped a bundle of eggs in straw, the father carries a sack of barley, and the children chatter about ribbons and trinkets they might glimpse. For you, it's the first time you'll see something other than endless fields and smoky huts. You fall into step with the villagers as they stream down the muddy road, anticipation cutting through the usual fatigue. The road is crowded, carts creak, oxen snort, and people from neighbouring hamlets converge, their goods slung across backs or piled into baskets. The walk itself is gruelling, the mud clinging to your feet, but the energy of the crowd carries you forward. After miles of trudging, the town walls rise into view, timber gates creaking open to swallow the tide of peasants and traders. Inside, the market square bursts with sound and colour. It feels, compared to the quiet of the village, like stepping into another world. Stalls line the square, rough wooden tables draped with goods, baskets of onions, wheels of cheese, barrels of ale, bolts of cloth dyed brighter than anything you've seen in the fields. The smell is overwhelming, a mingling of fresh bread, roasted meat, unwashed bodies, and manure. Hawkers shout, beckoning customers, praising their wares in sing-song chants. Minstrels strum lutes, children dart between legs, and the whole scene feels chaotic, noisy, alive. You follow the family as they set up their space, laying out eggs and barley. Customers approach, eyeing the goods, haggling sharply. There is little coin here. Silver pennies are rare, too precious to part with. Instead, barter rules the day. A woman offers a skein of dyed wool in exchange for barley. A man with smoked fish wants eggs. Every deal is a negotiation, a delicate balance of need and perceived value. You watch the father bargain, his voice firm but weary. One wrong trade could leave the family short for winter. When your turn comes, you attempt to haggle for bread. The baker laughs outright at your clumsy effort, but in the end agrees to exchange a crusty loaf for your offer of labour, help carrying sacks of flour. You stagger under the weight, sweat dripping, but the taste of warm bread afterward is worth every step. You realise that here, even your body can be currency. A quirky fact makes itself known as you wander. Medieval markets were not just for goods, but for news. Gossip flows as freely as ale. One merchant mutters about raiders spotted near the coast. Another whispers of a noble scandal, carried across counties by travelling traders. Information spreads in these squares faster than any church sermon. In a world without newspapers, markets are the rumour mills of England. As you explore, your eyes catch on luxuries. A merchant displays spices, pepper, cinnamon, saffron, each in tiny packets, each worth more than gold by weight. You breathe deeply, the sharp scent dizzying after weeks of bland pottage. The merchant explains that these treasures travel from the east, across deserts and seas, passing through dozens of hands before landing here. You long for a taste but quickly realise you could never afford it. Only lords and the wealthiest townsfolk might sprinkle saffron into their stews. For you, it remains an unreachable dream. Nearby, a cloth seller displays bolts of linen and wool, dyed in vibrant hues, crimson, deep indigo, even golden yellow. Women finger the fabric with longing, knowing their purses cannot stretch to buy it. Still, just touching such finery seems a luxury. You run your fingers along a length of blue wool, marvelling at how soft it feels compared to your scratchy tunic. The merchant watches your oar and smiles knowingly. To peasants, even the dream of colour is worth the walk. Entertainment flourishes too. Jugglers toss wooden balls, acrobats flip, and a bear on a chain snarls as its handler prods it forward. Children gape, laughing and shrieking. The noise is a welcome distraction from toil. You toss a coin into a minstrel's cap and he nods, strumming a jaunty tune that lingers in your ears long after you move on. But danger lurks here as well. You notice a boy slipping his hand into a woman's basket, lifting a loaf of bread before darting into the crowd. The woman shouts, but the thief vanishes. Pickpockets thrive in markets, where bodies press close and distractions are plenty. You clutch your meagre belongings tightly, realizing that a single theft could mean hunger. At midday, the square swells with the smell of roasting meat. You edge closer, watching a vendor turn a spit laden with pork. The fat sizzles dripping into the fire. You hand over the last of your labour-earned bread for a slice, the taste bursting on your tongue, smoky and rich. For a moment you forget toil, forget hunger. Then the bite is gone, and reality returns. Luxuries are fleeting. Historians still argue whether markets truly enriched peasants' lives or merely reminded them of what they lacked. For some, markets meant access to tools, salt, or fabric they could never make themselves. For others, they highlighted inequality, the wealth of townsfolk gleaming in contrast to rural poverty. Watching the bustle around you, you sense both truths. The peasants leave with goods to survive, yes, but also with visions of a life they will never reach. As evening falls, the crowd thins. The family gathers their meagre profits, a few coins, a bundle of wool, some salted fish. They seem content, though their faces are tired. You follow them back along the muddy road, the square fading into quiet behind you. The children chatter about the jugglers. The father counts the coins again. The mother clutches her wool as though it were silk. For them, the market is both burden and joy. A reminder that life can be more than fields, but also a reminder that most treasures lie forever out of reach. Back in the hut, the family sets aside their new goods with care. The salted fish will stretch meals through winter. The wool will patch garments. The coins might one day pay a fine or a tithe. You sink onto the straw, the day's noise still ringing in your ears. You realise that survival in medieval England depends not only on sweat in the fields, but on skill in barter, in haggling, in watching for both opportunity and theft. The market is not just a place to trade. It is a stage where survival plays out with bread, gossip and coins as props. As sleep steals over you, you hear echoes of the minstrel's song, faint but soothing. The fair is over, but tomorrow the fields await again, and so life swings back, pendulum-like, between toil and brief bursts of colour, leaving you wondering how long you can endure this rhythm without breaking. The first hint of trouble comes not from a shout, but from silence. You notice villagers gathered in the square, murmuring in hushed voices, their eyes darting toward the stocks near the churchyard. A man sits there already, hands and head trapped in wooden holes, his face flushed with humiliation. Children fling handfuls of mud at him, while women jeer as they pass. You draw closer, curious and uneasy, and overhear that his crime was stealing bread from his neighbour's oven. Hunger has teeth, you think, but justice here has sharper ones. The stocks are just the beginning. Crime in medieval England is not measured by intent but by survival. Theft, gossip, brawls, and even suspicion of witchcraft can bring punishment. Law is not a set of neatly printed codes. It is a patchwork of custom, the Lord's word, and the Church's authority. You soon realise that justice is less about fairness and more about maintaining order. Later that morning, the reeve arrives with 2 men-at-arms, dragging another villager by the collar. They haul him before the gathered crowd, accusing him of poaching deer from the Lord's forest. The man protests, swearing he trapped only rabbits for his starving children. But the reeve's face hardens. Hunting rights belong solely to the nobility. To take a deer is not just theft. It is trespassing on privilege. The villagers whisper, their faces pale. Everyone knows the punishment could be severe. You watch as the man is tied to a post, whipped until his back streams red. He collapses, sobbing, and is dragged away. The crowd disperses quickly, muttering but offering no help. Fear hangs heavy in the air. You swallow hard, realizing that in this world law is not blind. It watches carefully, and it favours the powerful. Historians still argue whether medieval justice was excessively cruel or simply practical for the times. Public punishment served as spectacle, reminding everyone of the cost of disobedience. Without prisons as you know them, punishment had to be immediate and visible. Stocks, whippings, mutilations, all etched lessons into the community's memory. Theft of bread today meant humiliation. Theft of livestock tomorrow could mean hanging. At noon, the priest delivers a sermon on honesty, his voice booming inside the church. He warns of eternal punishment for liars and thieves, weaving fire and brimstone into every word. Fear of hell becomes an extension of earthly justice. You notice villagers nodding solemnly, eyes wide. Religion and law blur seamlessly, both wielding punishment like a cudgel. The quirks of justice reveal themselves too. Trial by ordeal still lingers in memory. Plunging a hand into boiling water to prove innocence, or walking barefoot across hot irons. If wounds healed cleanly, God had judged you innocent. If they festered, you were guilty. Though such practices are fading in the 13th century, their shadow remains. You overhear older villagers recounting tales of ordeals past, their voices tinged with awe and dread. You shudder, imagining your own hands sinking into scalding water as proof of truth. Later, you see a different kind of punishment. A woman accused of gossip, of slandering her neighbour, has been strapped into a cucking stool, dunked repeatedly into the village pond while the crowd laughs cruelly. Her hair drips, her face pale with shock. This is justice too, humiliation as deterrent. Women in particular bear the brunt of such public shaming. You feel your stomach knot at the injustice, but the villagers cheer as though entertained. By evening you witness the most chilling act yet. A man accused of murder, though whether guilty or simply unlucky you cannot tell, is marched toward the gallows outside town. A rope dangles, creaking in the wind. The crowd gathers, solemn now, no laughter this time. Children cling to mothers, men bow their heads. The executioner ties the noose, and in moments the man drops, body jerking. Silence follows, broken only by the creak of rope. You feel bile rise in your throat. Death is not hidden here. It is spectacle, warning, ritual. You return to the hut shaken. The children chatter about the day's punishments as though they were stories, not horrors. The father mutters that justice is harsh but necessary. The mother crosses herself, whispering prayers for mercy. You lie down on the straw, mind racing. In your world, justice means courts, lawyers, appeals. Here it means rope, stocks, humiliation. It is swift, public, and merciless. A quirky tidbit comes to you as you drift towards sleep. Animals, too, were sometimes put on trial. Records exist of pigs executed for killing children, or roosters punished for laying eggs, a supposed sign of witchcraft. Historians still debate whether these trials were sincere or symbolic, but the image of a solemn court condemning a chicken to death lingers absurdly in your mind. In this world, even beasts are not safe from law's reach. As darkness falls, you cough into your sleeve, shivering despite the hearth's glow. You realise that survival here means more than enduring hunger and disease. It means avoiding suspicion, treading carefully, never drawing the wrong eyes. One misstep, one unlucky accusation, and you could find yourself in the stocks, the pond, or worse, the gallows. Sleep comes uneasily. Your dreams are haunted by the creak of rope, the laughter of children flinging mud, the priest's booming voice promising eternal fire. You roll over, clutching your blanket tighter. Justice in medieval England is not blind. It stares directly at you, unflinching, and dares you to step out of the line. The first time you hear the clatter of hooves on the road, it sets the entire village on edge. Chickens scatter, children are pulled indoors, and the men stiffen where they stand, hoes and scythes slipping from their hands. A group of riders approaches, their armour gleaming in patches beneath the grime, lances glinting like sudden flashes of lightning. These are not farmers. These are knights, and their presence here reminds you that medieval England lives under the shadow of war as much as under hunger and toil. You watch in awe and unease as the riders pass through the square. Their mail shirts jingle softly, their cloaks fluttering behind them. The villagers bow their heads, not from admiration but from fear. For knights may protect, but they also consume, demanding shelter, supplies, and respect. You feel the weight of their gaze as they survey the huts, their authority radiating like the church bell tolling doom. The reeve greets them stiffly, offering food and ale. The knights dismount, shaking mud from their boots, and stride toward the manor house that towers at the edge of the settlement. It is not a castle, but it is sturdy, stone-built, with a hall where the lord resides. You realise quickly that while peasants bend to the soil, knights bend only to their lords, wielding the sword as their tool. Curious, you follow at a distance, drawn by the magnet of steel. The manor's hall is vast compared to the huts, its timber beams arched high, banners hanging from the rafters. Inside, the lord sits at a long table, receiving the knights as honoured guests. He wears finer clothes, lined with fur, a jewelled dagger at his hip. Servants bustle with platters of meat and jugs of ale. The contrast between this hall and the smoky hut you slept in last night is almost obscene. Here, roasted venison drips fat onto silver platters. There, a single turnip-flavoured thin pottage. You swallow, your mouth watering despite the anger simmering beneath. Historians still argue whether knights were noble protectors or simply bullies in shining armour. The truth seems muddier than either tale. They train for war, yes, swearing oaths of loyalty to their lords, and in theory they defend the weak. But they also enforce power, collecting rents, quelling disputes, and fighting wars that seldom benefit peasants. For those hunched in the fields, knights mean not romance but requisition. War, too, is never far away. The lord's banners hint at his allegiance in some distant quarrel, perhaps to the king, perhaps to a neighbouring noble. You overhear talk of raids along the border, of levies being raised. Men from the village may soon be summoned to fight, armed with little more than spears and hope. You feel your stomach knot. You are no soldier, yet in this world you could be called at any moment. Later you venture beyond the manor, drawn toward the looming silhouette of a castle rising on the horizon. Its stone walls catch the sunlight, towers bristling with watchmen. The sight is awe-inspiring, almost alien after weeks of thatched huts and muddy fields. You trudge closer, your feet sinking in the ruts carved by cartwheels, until you stand at the base of its gatehouse. The portcullis looms above, iron teeth ready to fall. Guards eye you suspiciously, their spears gleaming. Inside, the courtyard bustles with activity. Blacksmiths hammering horseshoes, squires polishing armour, servants hauling buckets. The castle is a world unto itself, a fortress and a village combined. You wander wide-eyed, marvelling at the stone walls, the spiral staircases, the echoing halls. Here is power embodied in architecture. The peasants' huts may crumble in storms, but these walls promise endurance. A squire explains proudly the purpose of each part. The moat, filled with stagnant water, the keep, towering as last refuge, the battlements, where archers could rain death on attackers. You shiver, imagining the thunder of siege engines, the screams of men. Castles are not just homes, they are instruments of war. Their very stones hum with violence held in check. At night, you are permitted to join the great hall for a feast, more out of curiosity than hospitality. The lord dines with knights and ladies, their laughter loud, their goblets brimming. Platters of meat and fish circle endlessly, bread trenchers soaking grease. Music swells, minstrels plucking strings. You chew cautiously at a slice of pork, the richness almost overwhelming after weeks of coarse bread. Yet as you eat, you sense the tension in the room. These feasts are not mere indulgence, they are displays of wealth and power, reminders that the Lord commands not only land but the means to enjoy it. The quirky details of knightly life emerge as you listen. One knight boasts of tournaments, mock battles where armour clangs and lances splinter. He describes tilting against rivals, earning both coin and glory. Another speaks of crusades, of distant lands shimmering with heat, of relics carried home. You glance at the villagers serving wine, their faces blank, and wonder what they think of such tales. Do they admire, or do they silently tally the grain and men lost to such adventures? Historians still debate the true role of war in medieval peasant life. Some argue it was a distant thunder, disrupting only occasionally. Others insist it was constant, shaping every harvest, every tithe, every prayer. Watching the knights laugh and the servants scurry, you sense how war and peace bleed together here. The threat of conflict hangs always at the edge of vision, shaping life even when swords stay sheathed. The next day you watch drills in the castle yard. Knights spar with swords, their movements fluid and brutal. Squires fetch shields, fetch water, fetch anything their masters demand. Armour glints in the sun, heavy and hot. You try lifting a sword and nearly drop it, its weight far greater than you imagined. The knight laughs, clapping you on the back. To him, it is play. To you, it is impossibility. As you trudge back toward the village, you hear rumours of levies again. Men whisper of being conscripted, of leaving their families behind to march in the Lord's quarrel. Some fear the French, others fear Scots, Others still grumble about distant crusades. Whatever the enemy, the result is the same. Peasants bled of their strength, their fields untended, their lives shattered. That night, you lie awake in the smoky hut, replaying the images, the shining knights, the towering castle, the feast that overflowed while villagers starved. You wonder if, in some other life, you might admire such spectacle. But here, stripped of romance, it feels like another weight pressing down. Knights and castles are symbols not of chivalry but of power. Theirs to wield, yours to endure. Sleep finally comes, though uneasily. You dream of hooves thundering, of banners snapping, of walls crumbling under siege. You wake in darkness, heart pounding, realizing that in medieval England, war is never a story in books. It is the shadow under which you live, whether you hold the sword or bow beneath it. The sun rises pale, its light trickling through the mist like watered-down wine. The village stirs once more, but this morning you notice the rhythm differently. Men shuffle to the fields, tools slung across their shoulders, but your eyes follow the women. They do not simply stay behind. They carry water from the stream, knead dough with red hands, herd children like restless sheep. Their labour, though quieter, is just as relentless. And as you watch, you begin to see the invisible world of women in medieval England, woven tightly into every thread of survival. Inside the hut, the mother of the family stirs pottage again, this time muttering instructions to her daughter, who clumsily chops leeks with a blunt knife. The father is already gone, but her work begins here. Cooking, cleaning, tending animals, spinning wool, mending clothes. All this before the fields call her too. For women are not confined to hearth and home. They toil in furrows, carry dung, and help with harvest. Their bodies bend double alongside men, their hands calloused from equal labour. The notion of delicate femininity belongs only to ladies in castles, never to women in huts. Marriage is not romance here. It is contract, necessity, survival. Girls may wed as young as 12, boys at 14, though many wait longer. Families arrange unions less for love than for land, dowries, and alliances. You hear whispers of a neighbour's daughter betrothed to a man twice her age, her family eager to secure grazing rights for their sheep. The girl's eyes, when you glimpse her, look hollow, resigned. You shiver, realising that in this world, your choice in marriage is as fragile as the weather. Historians still argue whether peasant women were powerless chattel or resilient partners in survival. The truth you sense lies in between. A wife's labour is indispensable. She manages household, food, children, livestock. In her absence, a man cannot thrive. Yet law and custom weigh heavy. A woman's identity is tied to father, then husband. Property passes through men, not her hands. You hear of widows occasionally inheriting land, but they are pressured quickly into remarriage, their independence fleeting. You step into the square where a wedding is underway. The bride, no older than 16, wears her best dress, patched but brightened with ribbons. The groom, a broad-shouldered farmer, shifts nervously as the priest drones prayers in Latin. Villagers gather, laughing, tossing handfuls of grain over the couple. The feast afterward is modest: bread, ale, a bit of meat. Yet the atmosphere hums with relief. A union means security, another household to anchor the community. You sip ale, watching the bride smile shyly. Perhaps she feels hope. Perhaps she feels trapped. Both truths may be woven into her heart. Children follow swiftly after marriage. You've already seen how many fail to survive infancy. Mothers endure pregnancy after pregnancy, their bodies worn thin. Birth is perilous. Midwives whisper charms, pray to saints, and cut cords with rough knives. Death in childbirth is common. You overhear one woman recall how her sister bled out in the night, leaving behind a newborn who didn't last a week. Grief lingers, yet life presses forward. There is no pause, no respite. A quirky detail strikes you as you watch women at work. Ale brewing is often their domain. Alewives sell their weak brews to neighbours, stirring vats in smoky corners, hoping to earn a few pennies. Yet success can backfire. A woman who prospers too visibly may be branded dishonest or greedy, accused of watering down her ale, mocked in bawdy songs. The line between survival and scandal is razor thin. You notice too how women's voices shape community life. In the evenings they gather to spin wool, their fingers working while their tongues weave gossip. They know who owes rent, who sneaks into whose bed, whose child bears a suspicious resemblance to a neighbour. In a world where written records are rare, women's gossip is its own form of oral archive, messy, sharp, but essential. You chuckle quietly, imagining how historians centuries later might wish for such gossip preserved on parchment. Yet the dangers of being female are constant. Step outside the expected roles, speak too boldly, heal too effectively, defy too openly, and suspicion of witchcraft can follow. Already you've heard mutterings about an old widow who lives near the woods, collecting herbs and muttering charms. Some admire her remedies, others whisper fearfully, warning children to avoid her. You realise quickly that respectability is survival for women here. Step too far, and fear twists into accusation. The church, of course, reinforces this world. Priests preach about Eve's sin, about women as temptresses, about obedience to husbands. Yet paradoxically, they also honour the Virgin Mary, holding up motherhood as holy. Women walk a narrow ridge between sacred and sinful, expected to embody both at once. You watch as the mother of your host family crosses herself, her lips moving in prayer, and you wonder what mix of comfort and burden she feels at those teachings. Historians still debate whether medieval women were truly oppressed more than men, or simply oppressed differently. Men carried the yoke of field labour, taxes and war. Women bore childbirth, household management, and constant surveillance of reputation, each role crushed in its own way. Yet as you watch the mother cradle her infant, humming softly while stirring pottage with her free hand, you see resilience shimmering like embers. Power may not be official, but it pulses quietly in these smoky huts. Evenings end with family clustered around the fire. Children nestle against mothers, listening to tales and songs. A daughter practices embroidery, her stitches crooked but careful. A son carves a whistle from wood, proudly tooting until his siblings swat him. You feel the warmth of this domestic circle, fragile yet fierce. Marriage may be contract, childbirth may be hazard, but in these quiet moments, affection is real. Families laugh, argue, love, grieve, just as yours once did. As you curl onto your straw pile, smoke curling above, you think of the women you've met today. The bride smiling nervously, the widow feared for her herbs, the mother whose hands never stop moving. Their world is narrow, bounded by duty, law and suspicion. Yet within that narrowness they carve spaces of strength. Patching clothes, brewing ale, soothing children, whispering prayers. You close your eyes with a final reflection. In medieval England, survival is not only men with ploughs or knights with swords, it is women's endless, often invisible labour, stitching life together day after smoky day. Without them, the world would crumble faster than thatch in a storm. The sound of laughter wakes you before the rooster crows. Thin, high-pitched voices darting about like sparrows. You push yourself upright from the straw and peer outside the hut. Children streak barefoot through the mud, chasing a hoop of bent willow that wobbles and tips over, sending them shrieking with delight. It is not the laughter of modern playgrounds. It is raw, brief, a flare of joy squeezed between hours of labour. At first glance, childhood here looks familiar. The boys' roughhouse. The girls giggle together. Someone brandishes a stick like a sword. But look longer, and you see the difference. Their limbs are thin, their bellies a little swollen with poor diet. Their tunics hang short, patched so many times the original cloth is barely visible. They are not shielded from hardship. Even the youngest carry small burdens, bundles of sticks, pails of water, baskets of dung. Childhood here is not a sanctuary. It is a short bridge to work. Inside the hut, the family's smallest boy rubs sleep from his eyes, then is handed a small broom to sweep rushes across the floor. His older sister is already tending to chickens. Their father mutters something about the fields, and the eldest son, no more than 10, trots after him, clutching a hoe far too heavy for his frame. You realise with a pang that what you considered chores are, for them, necessities. Survival demands every pair of hands, no matter how small. Historians still argue whether medieval childhood was recognised as distinct, or whether children were seen as little adults. The truth lies somewhere in between. Babies and toddlers were cherished, rocked and sung to, yet beyond early years, expectation came swiftly. By 7, children joined parents in labour. By 12, many were apprenticed, married or in service. There is little space for the long, playful adolescence you know. You walk into the square later and spot children playing a game with stones. They toss them in patterns, singing a rhyme half remembered. Another group kicks a leather ball, their laughter ringing as the ball splats into mud. These games, though simple, reveal something enduring. Joy carved from scraps. No polished toys, no plastic. A doll made from rags, a hoop from wood, a whistle from bone. Their imaginations fill the rest. One quirky tidbit. Hobby horses were popular, sticks with carved heads on which children galloped, mimicking knights. You watch a boy ride his crooked stick, shouting, "For the king!" while his friend pretends to be the dragon, roaring dramatically before collapsing. The other children clap, then scatter back to chores. Play never lasts long. Education, if it appears, comes through church or town. A few lucky boys might learn Latin from priests, scratching letters onto wax tablets. Girls, meanwhile, learn domestic skills, spinning, weaving, cooking, passed down from mothers. Most children never see a book. You realise suddenly that the modern notion of childhood as a time of school, exploration and growth simply does not exist here. Knowledge is survival, not curiosity. As noon approaches, you follow the family's eldest boy to a neighbouring village, where an apprenticeship contract is being signed. A blacksmith takes him in exchange for years of labour and training. The boy's parents watch solemnly, their faces proud yet pained. They know they may see him rarely, but apprenticeship offers a future, skills that might feed him when their own land cannot. The boy himself trembles, clutching a small bundle of belongings. His new master claps him on the shoulder, already discussing the work ahead. Blowing bellows, hammering iron, tending fires. There is no gentle transition. Childhood ends in a handshake and a promise of obedience. On the way back, you overhear whispers of another path for children. Service in larger households. Boys become pages, girls become maids, both bound to years of drudgery in exchange for food, shelter, and perhaps a small wage. Some rise through loyalty, others fade into obscurity. For parents, it is often the only choice. Too many mouths to feed, too few strips of land. That evening you sit with the family by the hearth. The children gather close, eyes bright as their father tells a tale of Robin Hood, the outlaw who steals from the rich to give to the poor. Their laughter bursts again, but you notice the undertone. It is hope disguised as story. For them, legends of heroes bring not entertainment alone, but comfort in a world where justice rarely favours the poor. As the fire burns low, the children curl against each other, whispering secrets and dreams. One girl murmurs that she wishes to see the sea. Another boasts that he will become a knight, though the others laugh at the idea. The smallest drifts off mid-sentence, thumb in mouth. For a moment their faces are softened by sleep, free of toil. Historians still debate how much affection medieval parents showed, whether children were loved or treated as expendable in a world where death was constant. Watching this family, you see tenderness in every gesture. The mother stroking her daughter's hair, the father lifting his son onto his knee, the siblings piling together in warmth. Love exists here, though grief shadows it. You realise the question is not whether parents loved, but how they endured loving in a world where loss was inevitable. A final quirky tidbit. Children sometimes played games we still know today. Blind man's buff, tag, marbles. Their laughter echoes across centuries, unchanged in rhythm. You smile faintly, realising that though toys differ, the human impulse for play survives even the harshest ages. As you lay down on the straw, the sound of giggling lingers in your ears. Childhood here is fleeting, yes, and heavy with work. But within that fleeting space, moments of joy blaze bright. A rag doll becomes a treasure, a game of stones becomes a festival. You close your eyes, imagining the children's dreams, fragile but fierce, carrying them toward uncertain tomorrows. In medieval England, to survive childhood is to grow up fast, to trade games for tools, laughter for duty. And yet, those brief sparks of play remind you that even in the grimmest world, joy finds a way to survive. The rooster's crow drags you into wakefulness again, but for once the day does not open with the grind of tools and toil. Instead, the village stirs with a different kind of energy, lighter, almost playful. Today is not a feast day ordained by the church, yet murmurs ripple through the huts about a gathering, a fair, a chance for laughter. You rub the sleep from your eyes, half disbelieving. Leisure here, in a world that seems chained to hunger and obligation, and yet You follow the crowd, curiosity tugging at your weary limbs. In the square, the air smells not just of smoke and dung, but of roasting meat, though only scraps will reach the peasants. Musicians are tuning their instruments, a fiddle, a pipe, a drum. Children dart between adults, their laughter unrestrained. Women chatter while braiding ribbons into hair. Men grin, their shoulders relaxed for once. You realise that even in medieval England, where survival is the central note, life is not all dirges. Sometimes, even the poorest steal hours of melody and colour. A troupe of entertainers has arrived, their garb brighter than anything worn in the village. They juggle wooden balls, balance on stilts, and crack crude jokes that make the peasants laugh so loudly you feel it in your chest. One man pulls out a trained dog that hops through a hoop, earning cheers. Another juggles knives, his eyes wild with mock danger. You smile despite yourself. Even here, laughter cuts through hardship like a candle flame through smoke. You notice, too, the ways villagers entertain themselves without professional performers. A group of young men wrestles in the mud, cheered on by their friends. Two women challenge each other in a contest of spinning wool, their fingers flying while neighbours clap in rhythm. Children chase a leather ball, shouting wildly, while an older man carves riddles into the dirt, daring passers-by to solve them. You realise entertainment does not always require spectacle, just people, together, eager for joy. Historians still argue how much leisure time peasants truly had. Some claim their lives were endless drudgery. Others note that holy days, markets and seasonal festivals offered more pauses than industrial workers centuries later. Watching the villagers today, you lean toward the latter. Work is constant, yes, but so is the need for release. A song, a dance, even a jest about the reeve's sour face. These are necessary acts of survival too. As the day stretches, musicians strike up faster tunes. A circle of dancers forms, hands clasped, feet stamping in rhythm. You're pulled in by laughing children, stumbling at first, but soon swept into the whirl. The dance is simple, repetitive, easy to learn yet strangely exhilarating. Around and around you go, the dust rising, the music quickening, until your heart pounds and sweat beads your brow. The villagers laugh at your clumsiness, but it is friendly laughter, not cruel. For a moment, you belong. Food and drink circulate. Ale flows freely, weaker than tavern brew, but plentiful enough to loosen tongues. A man presses a roasted onion into your hand, its sweetness surprising you. Others nibble at pies filled with spiced vegetables, a luxury saved for such gatherings. You hear gossip laced with humour, who tripped over a pig, who danced poorly, who secretly fancies the miller's daughter. Jokes fly, bawdy and sharp, making you blush and laugh in turn. A quirky tidbit emerges. Some villagers reenact biblical stories or local legends, acting them out with masks and crude props. You watch as they perform a tale of Saint George slaying the dragon. The dragon is nothing more than a painted cloth flapping on a stick, but the crowd roars with delight. Children shriek when the dragon lunges, then clap when George delivers the fatal blow. Storytelling here is not polished theatre, but it binds the community together with shared myth and laughter. As twilight falls, the festivities shift tone. A bonfire blazes in the square, sparks leaping into the night. Villagers gather close, singing songs that rise and fall like waves. Some are hymns, their solemn notes blending faith with festivity. Others are ballads of lost love, outlaw heroes or foolish knights. The melodies are simple, the words plain, yet the effect is mesmerising. You hum along, your voice blending into the chorus, feeling the warmth of belonging despite the strangeness of it all. You notice couples slipping away into the shadows, laughter trailing behind. For some, festivals are a chance for courtship, for stolen moments away from watchful eyes. You think of the young bride you saw days ago, and imagine how such nights might spark whispers of romance or scandal. Here, leisure is not just about play, but about weaving the web of social ties, alliances, rivalries, affections. Later, as the fire dies low, the villagers linger, unwilling to let go of this rare reprieve. A man tells a long winding tale of a knight tricked by a clever fox, his gestures grand, his voice animated. Children yawn but cling to his every word. Women roll their eyes at his exaggerations but smile anyway. Even the reeve, often grim, chuckles in the shadows. For a few hours, the burdens of rent, toil, and hunger fade into the background. Historians still debate whether medieval fairs were primarily economic or social events. You suspect both. They sell goods, yes, but they also sell joy. Moments when peasants remember they are more than labourers. Watching the faces around you, glowing in firelight, you see how these gatherings sustain not just bodies, but spirits. When the crowd disperses at last, you return to the hut with the family. The children chatter excitedly, replaying games and songs. The mother hums softly, her eyes bright despite fatigue. The father smiles faintly, his shoulders less bowed. You collapse onto your straw pile, ears ringing with music, heart lighter than it has been in weeks. As you drift into sleep, you realise entertainment here is not an escape from reality, but a weaving into it. Threads of laughter, song and dance stitched through hardship. Survival in medieval England is not only ploughing, paying and praying. It is also these fragile hours of joy that keep people human. Without them, the weight of toil and fear would crush the soul. And so you close your eyes, the echoes of fiddles and laughter lingering, carrying you gently into dreams. The first time you venture beyond the village with purpose, you feel the strangeness of leaving the fragile circle of huts, fields, and church that has defined your world until now. The family you stay with has business in the next town, barter to make, perhaps a relative to visit, and you are invited to walk with them. The excitement of going somewhere new buzzes in your chest, but so does apprehension. Travel in medieval England is not freedom, it is risk. The road itself barely deserves the name. It is little more than a rutted track carved by countless feet, hooves and wagon wheels. Rain has turned it into a mire, sucking at your shoes with each step. Puddles glint dully in the weak morning light. You stumble often, nearly twisting your ankle on stones or sinking into unexpected hollows. Your modern mind longs for pavement, for even gravel, but here the road is mud, and mud is endless. The father warns you to keep close. Travellers disappear on lonely paths, some to bandits, who lurk in woods and ambush the unwary. Others to wolves, though those tales are rarer. More vanish to simple misfortune. Broken limbs, illness, exhaustion. The thought chills you. A walk that would feel like exercise in your world is a gamble with your life here. You pass fellow travellers, a pair of monks in brown habits, sandals slapping mud, a peddler pushing a creaking cart of trinkets and spices, a group of pilgrims marked by badges pinned to cloaks, muttering prayers as they trudge towards some distant shrine. Everyone nods stiffly but keeps moving. There is no lingering. On the road, strangers mean danger as much as friendship. At midday you rest beneath an oak, gnawing on bread hardened from travel. The children chase each other briefly, but their parents hush them. Noise might draw attention. You glance around, realizing how exposed you feel with no walls, no huts, just fields and trees stretching endlessly. The world feels vast, and you feel small. Historians still argue how often peasants actually travelled. Some claim most never left their village in a lifetime. Others point to markets, pilgrimages and labour service as regular reasons for journeys. Watching the family, you see both truths. They move reluctantly, aware of the risks, but necessity drives them on. Hunger, obligation, and faith all demand movement. As you continue, you cross a wooden bridge spanning a sluggish river. Its planks creak, some missing, the water below brown and swirling. You grip the rail tightly, praying it holds. The father mutters about tolls, many bridges demand payment for passage. Today you are lucky, no collector waits, but he tells you grimly of other places where travellers without coin turn back, their journeys broken. A quirky tidbit surfaces as you walk. Wayfarers sometimes carried pilgrim badges or tokens from shrines, believed to grant protection. These serve not just as souvenirs but as passports, marking you as pious, less likely to be harassed. You glance at the pilgrims trudging ahead and notice their badges gleaming. Perhaps they offer more comfort than true safety. But comfort matters. The road twists through a patch of forest, shadows swallowing you. Every snap of a twig makes you tense. The mother clutches her children tightly. Stories of outlaws haunt these woods. Desperate men turned bandits, lurking with knives. You strain your ears, half expecting an ambush, but only birds call above. Still, you walk faster, heart hammering. By late afternoon, the spires of the next town rise into view. Relief floods you, though your legs ache and your feet throb. The walls stand tall, gates flanked by guards. You queue with other travellers, waiting for inspection. Guards peer into baskets, ask brusque questions, and sometimes demand tolls. The father surrenders a coin with a grimace. You slip inside at last, feeling the strange press of urban life. Streets noisier, narrower, more crowded than the village. Inside the town, trade bustles, but you cannot forget the road behind you. Travel here is always shadowed by exhaustion, by tolls, by fear of attack. Your modern longing for road trips and maps seems laughable. Here, a journey of 10 miles is a test of endurance. That evening you lodge in a tavern. The room is crowded, straw strewn across the floor, bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder. Ale flows, laughter rises, but you notice how travellers keep hands on purses, eyes on doors. Trust is rare on the road, rarer still in towns where strangers gather. You sip ale quietly, listening to boasts of near robberies, of nights lost in forests, of wolves howling close. One man brags of walking all the way to Canterbury on pilgrimage, weeks of trudging through mud. Another tells of sailing across the Channel, seasickness so violent he swore never to leave shore again. You realise journeys define lives here as much as fields. Pilgrimages, fairs, wars, all require feet on muddy paths. Travel is identity as much as destination. Historians still debate whether medieval roads were truly impassable or merely challenging. Some Roman roads linger, their stones worn but sturdy. Others degrade into quagmires, swallowing carts. You suspect both are true. One path may hold firm, another collapse, and travellers must accept the gamble. On your return journey, dusk creeps quickly. Shadows lengthen, owls call, and fear thickens the air. You hurry, stumbling through mud, eyes darting at every rustle. The family presses close, their voices low. At last the familiar huts appear, their smoke curling into the night sky. Relief rushes through you like warmth. That night, you collapse onto straw, body aching, mind racing. Travel here is not adventure. It is survival strung across miles of mud and fear. You marvel at the courage of pilgrims who walk hundreds of miles, of traders who push carts year after year. To survive medieval England is to master not just fields and huts, but roads that stretch endlessly, mercilessly across the land. As you drift into sleep, you think, in your world, travel is freedom, leisure, exploration. Here, it is endurance, risk, and necessity. And tomorrow, the road may call again, whether you wish it or not. You awake to a different rhythm this morning. Not the rooster's cry, or the shuffle of feet in fields, but the clamour of bells ringing from the town square. The family you travelled with has lingered here longer than usual, and so you find yourself roused not in a smoky hut, but in a cramped lodging house, where straw-stuffed mattresses line the floor in uneven rows. The smell of stale ale and unwashed bodies fills your nose as you push yourself upright. Outside, the air is sharper, filled with noise and bustle unlike the quiet of the village lanes. The town is alive. Narrow streets twist between half-timbered houses that jut precariously overhead, their upper floors leaning so close they nearly kiss. Merchants shout from stalls, hawking salted fish, bolts of cloth, and spices measured out grain by grain. The clop of hooves mixes with the cries of apprentices dragging carts, and always the smell, damp earth, dung, frying onions, and humanity squeezed too tightly together. You feel both exhilarated and claustrophobic, caught in a tide of people. Soon you're swept toward the square where law takes centre stage. The town bailiff, robed in authority, presides over a gathering. A thief is brought forward, accused of stealing cloth from a merchant's stall. Witnesses speak, their words tangled with emotion and contradiction. The crowd listens, jeers, shouts advice. You expect procedure, a sense of fairness, but here, law is theatre. The bailiff nods gravely, pronounces guilt, and sentences the man to a fine he cannot pay. Instead, he is taken to the pillory, his head and hands locked as townsfolk pelt him with rotten vegetables. Justice has been served, not with deliberation but with display. Historians still argue whether medieval law was truly cruel or simply communal. In towns, especially, the spectacle mattered as much as the verdict. Punishment reminded everyone that theft and violence endangered fragile commerce. Watching the thief's humiliation, you see how fear and entertainment mingle in one act. For the townsfolk, justice is both protection and pastime, yet not all law is punitive. You notice officials inspecting bread at the baker's stalls, ensuring loaves meet the assize, a regulated weight and price. Bakers who cheat may face fines or worse, for bread is life itself, and shorting customers is a dangerous act. Another officer checks measures of ale, ensuring the jugs are not watered down. In these moments, law feels protective, ensuring fairness in trade where survival hangs on every penny. Later, you follow the sounds of hammering into the quarter of the guilds. Here, the smell shifts to hot metal, leather, and sawdust. Blacksmiths clang at anvils, sparks flying. Weavers stretch cloth across frames, the rhythm of their shuttles like beating wings. These guilds are more than workshops. They are families of trade, bands of craftsmen who regulate their skills, guard their secrets, and protect their livelihoods. To be part of a guild is to gain respect, stability, and community. A master blacksmith greets you with a nod, showing his apprentice sweating over bellows. The boy works tirelessly, eyes fixed on the glowing iron. His future depends on these years of training, learning every detail, every trick. One day he may become a journeyman, travelling to ply his craft, and perhaps, if fortune favours him, a master with a workshop of his own. But until then, he is bound by oath and obligation. The guilds also wield power beyond craft. They set standards, enforce prices, and sometimes pressure town councils. To cheat or undercut a guild member is to invite ruin. You overhear talk of a merchant fined for selling cloth below guild price, his goods seized as penalty. Here, law is not just lords and reeves, but the collective weight of craftsmen who guard their trades fiercely. A quirky tidbit strikes you as you wander. Some guilds held elaborate feasts, parading through town in bright robes, carrying banners, singing songs. These were not mere revels, but public declarations of pride and unity. Even in work there is performance. You imagine the blacksmiths marching in soot-stained tunics, followed by bakers bearing loaves, their voices booming hymns into narrow streets, pride and identity bound together by trade. But towns are not only guilds and markets. They are fragile tapestries of people crammed together, merchants, craftsmen, apprentices, labourers, beggars. You pass a group of lepers ringing bells to warn of their approach, their faces shrouded, their hands extended for alms. People recoil, crossing themselves. Further on you see a wealthy merchant striding in a fur-lined cloak, his servant trailing with a ledger. Children dart barefoot, begging scraps. This contrast is sharper than in villages. Here, wealth and poverty brush shoulders daily, and the tension hums in the air. By afternoon, the town court resumes. This time, disputes are civil. A merchant accusing a tanner of failing to deliver hides, a woman demanding repayment of a debt. The bailiff listens, scribes record in hasty Latin, and verdicts are delivered swiftly. You're struck by how much of life here revolves around debt, contracts, and promises. In villages, survival depends on soil. In towns, survival depends on agreements, and the law ensures those agreements hold teeth. As evening falls, torches flare in the streets, taverns hum with noise, ale sloshing, dice clattering, voices rising in song and argument. You duck inside one, finding the air thick with smoke. Merchants brag of profits, apprentices gamble their meagre wages, a minstrel sings of a scandal involving the local reeve. You sip ale cautiously, realising that townsfolk unwind no differently than villagers. They simply do so louder, closer, pressed against walls that echo with every word. Historians still argue whether towns were liberating spaces compared to villages. On one hand, townsfolk are freer, less bound to lords, more able to rise through trade. On the other, towns are dangerous, crowded, unsanitary, filled with opportunity for crime and exploitation. Watching the bustling streets, you feel both truths collide. The energy is intoxicating, but the risks are obvious. One wrong trade, one quarrel, and ruin could arrive swiftly. As night deepens, you return to the lodging house, ears still buzzing with noise. You lie on your straw pallet, pressed between strangers, and reflect on the day. In the town, survival depends on more than toil. It depends on navigating law, guilds, and the unspoken codes of urban life. To belong here, you must master trade, respect guilds, avoid the bailiff's gaze, and carve your place in the crush of bodies. You close your eyes, the clamour of the town echoing in your dreams, the clang of hammers, the cry of merchants, the jeers at the pillory. Law here is both shield and weapon, guilds both refuge and cage, townsfolk both kin and rival. And tomorrow the rhythm will begin again, as unyielding as the tolling of the church bell. You wake to the toll of bells again, but today they carry a different mood. It is not a feast day nor a market summons, but something quieter, an air of unease, of whispers floating more quickly than usual through the crooked streets. As you step outside the lodging house, you notice townsfolk murmuring to one another, fingers tracing crosses on foreheads, sprigs of herbs tucked into doorframes. Even the children seem subdued, their play muted. You ask a passerby what troubles the town, and he mutters about a cow that's sickened overnight, its milk turning red. He spits into the dirt and says a word you've heard in hushed tones before: witchcraft. You've seen hunger, toil, disease, and law. Now you face the unseen world that shadows every hut, every lane, every hearth in medieval England. Faith may dominate public life, but beneath the sermons runs a current of superstition, as constant as the smoke from chimneys. People here live in a world half physical, half magical, where saints and demons, fairies and curses all press in at the edges of daily life. You walk with the family who has taken you in, watching as the mother knots a charm of red thread around her daughter's wrist. For protection, she explains simply. No one questions it. Just as you might slip on sunscreen before leaving your home, she ties on a charm. In this world, the unseen is as practical as the seen. Herbs, too, are steeped in meaning. A sprig of rosemary hung above a doorway to keep out illness. A wreath of saint. John's wort burned to ward off evil spirits. Garlic braided and hung in rafters to deter not only sickness but malice. You smell these sharp scents often, mingled with the smoke of the hearth, and you realise the line between medicine and magic blurs constantly here. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Villagers often believed fairies could steal infants from their cradles, leaving behind changelings, sickly, uncanny children who never thrived. Mothers kept iron scissors or knives near beds to ward off such theft, iron being thought poisonous to fairies. One evening, you see a mother tuck a rusty knife beneath her baby's blanket. The sight makes you shiver, but she does it with calm assurance. To her, it is as necessary as feeding the child. At night, stories grow richer. Around the hearth, neighbours share tales of ghosts roaming crossroads, of will-o'-the-wisps leading travellers into swamps, of witches who spoil butter or blight fields with a muttered curse. The children listen wide-eyed, clutching each other. You too lean forward despite yourself. Rationally, you know these are stories. But in the smoky dark, with the wind howling outside, you feel the shiver crawl your spine. Historians still argue whether these superstitions were truly believed, or simply told as entertainment, like ghost stories today. Yet watching the villagers' faces, their eyes darting to the shadows as they speak, you sense belief runs deep. The unseen is not metaphor. It is threat. The priest, of course, rails against such beliefs, condemning charms and fairy tales as pagan remnants. Yet even he sprinkles holy water liberally, mutters blessings over fields, and prescribes prayers against storms. The church and superstition dance together awkwardly, each feeding off fear of the unknown. If hail destroys crops, is it God's punishment, the devil's work, or a witch's curse? Perhaps all three. One afternoon, you witness a strange ritual. A cow has fallen ill and the villagers gather round. The cunning woman sprinkles herbs into a fire, chanting softly. The smoke curls, thick and acrid. She touches the cow's flank with a branch of ash, muttering words too low to catch. The family watches anxiously, their hands clasped in prayer. You feel the weight of centuries pressing down. Here, survival means calling upon every power, holy or hidden, you can muster. Another quirky detail. Fortune-telling thrives even here. A girl plucks petals from a daisy, chanting about who she might marry. An older woman reads cracks in eggshells dropped into water, predicting good or bad harvests. Children chase each other with laughter, pretending to cast spells. These acts are playful, yet beneath them lies seriousness. The future is uncertain, and glimpses of fate, no matter how flimsy, bring comfort. Travellers bring fresh tales. A pilgrim speaks of a shrine where relics glow faintly in the night. A merchant mutters about charms sold in London. small pewter badges shaped like hands or eyes, meant to guard against envy. You realise the unseen world stretches across England, woven into every road, every field, every fire. But fear is not harmless. One evening, a child falls ill, suddenly racked with fever. Whispers dart quickly. Someone mutters about the widow on the edge of town, the one who gathers herbs alone at night. Eyes narrow. By morning, a crowd has gathered outside her hut. Voices sharp, fists raised. She protests, holding up sprigs of sage, insisting she only heals. But suspicion outweighs words. She's dragged before the bailiff, her cries drowned by accusations. You watch, horrified, as her fate teeters on the edge of superstition and law. That night she is gone, banished, some say, or worse. The villagers return home uneasy, muttering prayers. You lie awake, realising how fragile safety is in a world where fear of the unseen can condemn. Historians still argue how widespread witch persecutions were in medieval England. True witch hunts peaked later, in the early modern period, but suspicion already brewed in these centuries. What you see is the soil from which hysteria grows. Poverty, fear, sickness, and the desperate need to blame. As you drift to sleep, the wind rattling shutters, you think of iron scissors by cradles, of herbs smouldering on coals, of whispered tales of fairies in the woods. You realise that to live here, you cannot simply reject superstition. You must lean into it, carry charms, mutter prayers, watch shadows. Survival is not just in toil or barter, but in belief. Belief that the unseen can be managed, warded off, bargained with. Your eyes closed, dreams flickering with firelight and phantom shapes. You may not believe in witches, but tonight you tuck your blanket tighter, whispering a half-serious prayer of protection. In medieval England, disbelief is a luxury no one dares afford. The morning after the widow's banishment feels different, though the same rooster crows and the same smoke drifts from chimneys. The rhythm of life continues, but beneath it you sense a rawness. The villagers walk quickly, eyes lowered, as if wary that too much talk might summon unseen forces. For weeks you have laboured, sweated, itched, and prayed alongside them, and now you realise with a hollow certainty, survival here is not about one battle, but about endless skirmishes against hunger, cold, lords, priests, disease, even rumours. You trudge to the fields once more, the hoe heavy in your hands, the soil resisting each strike. Your body has grown stronger, blisters turn to calluses, muscles firmer from toil, yet exhaustion lives permanently in your bones. You wonder if this is what survival truly means here. Not a single triumph, but the ability to keep rising, to keep bending, even when every part of you begs for rest. The family you live with greets you with nods now, no longer staring at you as a stranger. You patch clothes with the mother, you herd chickens with the children, you drink ale with the father after long days. Their world has become yours, and yet part of you still stands apart, measuring every act against the life you left. You can never quite silence the thought that, in your world, a pill would ease that fever, a car would shorten that journey, a machine would plough that soil. Here, those luxuries are fantasies. As evening falls, you sit by the hearth, listening to talk of rents and harvests. A neighbour complains of the Lord's new demand, extra hens for the manor's kitchen. Another whispers that the priest has spoken of demons prowling the land. The children play nearby, their laughter thin but persistent. Life hums forward, fragile but unbroken. You realise that in this place, survival is not measured in years, but in days strung together like beads on a cord. A quirky tidbit you overhear. One man boasts of surviving a winter eating nothing but acorns ground into bitter flour. Another recalls chewing boiled nettles until spring came. These stories are not exaggerations. They are badges of endurance. To survive here is to turn even desperation into memory, and memory into pride. Historians still argue whether medieval life was truly unbearable or simply different. Some say peasants accepted their lot, their lives steady if harsh. Others argue they lived on the edge of collapse, fear a constant companion. Watching this village, you see both. There is laughter, yes, and song, and brief bursts of joy at markets or fairs. But there is also hunger gnawing always at the edges, smoke stinging eyes, whispers ready to condemn. As the fire burns low, the father looks at you and asks quietly, "Will you stay?" You cannot answer. Could you survive here, truly? Could you wake each morning knowing the soil owns your back, the lord your labour, the priest your conscience, and fear your imagination? You think of the widow cast out, of the thief whipped, of the child buried in shallow earth. You think of the market's brief wonders, of music and dance around the bonfire. Life here is not hopeless, but it is relentless. You climb onto your straw bed, pulling the wool blanket close. Your body aches, but your mind hums with the question that has haunted you since the first morning you woke in this strange land. Could you survive medieval England? Perhaps for a while, you've learned to swing a hoe, to drink ale instead of water, to stomach coarse bread. You've learned to nod at the reeve, to bow at the priest's sermon, to carry charms against the unseen. You've even laughed at the market, danced clumsily with villagers, and felt the warmth of belonging by the hearth. And yet, your modern softness tugs at you. You crave clean water, private space, medicine, freedom from constant fear. Without them, survival feels less like life and more like endurance. Perhaps that is the final truth. People did not live in medieval England. They endured. And the fact they found laughter and song within that endurance is the greatest testament to human resilience. You close your eyes, the fire crackling faintly, the children breathing steadily beside you. Tomorrow will come with the same hunger, the same toil, the same fear. Whether you rise to meet it or finally break beneath it is uncertain. But tonight, you survive. And sometimes, in this world, tonight is enough. Now, as the story folds gently closed, let your breath slow. Imagine the smoky huts fading into mist, the weight of the hoe slipping from your hands, the ache in your bones softening into nothingness, the clamour of markets, the tolling of bells, the whispers of superstition, all drift away like echoes carried on a far wind. What remains is quiet. Picture the fields stretching endlessly, but now they are calm, no toil waiting, no reeve's watchful eye. Just the hush of evening, the long shadows of hedgerows, the slow wheel of stars overhead. The villagers have melted back into the past, their laughter and labour folded into memory. You're no longer bound to their duties. You're a guest who has walked their roads, shared their bread, felt their fears, and now you can step back into rest. Your breath is steady. The fire is only embers now, its glow soft, no longer stinging with smoke. Each ember fades, one by one, as though even the hearth itself sighs into sleep, and you too let go. Of hunger, of hardship, of the endless weight of survival. The unseen world retreats, charms and whispers dissolving. What remains is the warmth of belonging you felt for brief moments, the proof that even in the harshest times, people found ways to laugh, to hope, to love. So allow the images to dim. Let the thrum of hooves, the ring of the blacksmith's hammer, the cries of children blur into a gentle hum. Breathe in, breathe out. You have walked through medieval England and returned. Now there is only quiet.